Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Low Budget Review Show. I am your host, Eric Smith, and today I am talking about Interview with the Vixen by Rebecca Barrow. This is a scholastic young adult book, and this says an original Archie Horror novel. So, based on the Archie Comics horror line, I wanted to check something here. And quick scan doesn't tell me what I want to know. So there's a comic book, Archie Comics. Let's start with that. As a youngster, I was a big fan of Archie Comics. I'm assuming I read the regular full-size Archie Comics, but what I really remember is getting the digest Archie Comics and reading those. And then eventually I stopped reading Archie's. I matured. And stopped reading Archie Comics. But now, I don't remember how many years ago they started sort of this horror line. I believe it started with Afterlife with Archie, which is zombies. I have the trade paperback, haven't read it yet. And then I believe the follow-up was The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, and I've read the first trade paperback of that, the only trade paperback there is at the moment. Fantastic, absolutely loved it. And then Cullen Bunn wrote Blossom 666, where either Cheryl Blossom or her brother are the Antichrist. They don't know which one. There's the Jughead the Hunger, I believe it's called, where Jughead's a werewolf. And then there's Vampironica, where Veronica Lodge, of Betty and Veronica fame, is a vampire. I have the first volume of that. I have not read it yet. I'm going to read it very, very soon, but I chose not to do it yet. I wanted to get the review of the book itself without getting it mixed up with the comic book in my head. So I wanted to get to review this first. But the reason I sort of bring all this up is I don't know. This does say an original Archie Horror novel. But sometimes things say things. So I don't know, excuse me, how much it follows the comic book. If it follows the comic book at all, if it's its own thing, if it's actually a novelization of the first volume or first two volumes of the comic, I don't know. All I know is what's in this book. I will know eventually. Because I'm going to read I can see it right over there. I've dug it out from where it was hiding. So, all of that being said, let's get to Interview with the Vixen. So, Archie Comics, you've got Archie, Betty, Veronica, Jughead, who's not actually in this book. We'll get to that in a minute. Reggie, Moose, Midge, all the Riverdale gang. And this, I think, is more in line with the TV show Riverdale than the old comics. Again, I have not read Archie in ages. I don't know if they've been sort of modernized in the comic books. I just remember the old stuff. And then I watched the first half of the first season of Riverdale. So this sort of seems more in line. Archie is part of the football team. He's very popular. Seems very popular. Reggie is also part of the football team, so he and Archie are teammates. There's not as much as a rivalry. Not as much of a rivalry as I remember from the comics. So this is Veronica's vampire origin story. We're introduced to the characters, the love triangle between Archie, Betty, and Veronica. And we meet Cheryl Blossom, Reggie, some other characters. And now there is a cold open, and then it goes to 5 days earlier. So we get a little action right off the bat. Then we go to 5 days earlier. Then we meet all our characters. And eventually some things happen. And Veronica gets turned into a vampire. She wants her old life back. And wants to kill, kill the vampire that turned her. So there's very much a Buffy the Vampire Slayer vibe going on here. If Buffy was a vampire, because Veronica sort of forms her own gang. Eventually, certain characters learn that she is a vampire, and they agree to help her to stop this vampire the vampire that turned her, who has this big plan for Riverdale. I think the title, I know what they were going for, but I think it's a little misleading because the book is not in first person. It jumps from character to character. There are multiple POVs, which works fine. It's a well-written, very entertaining book. But isn't Interview with the Vampire in first person because Louis is telling his story? It's been ages since I read it. But this isn't. It's the chapter headings are the characters that we're going to be following in that chapter, essentially. And it bounces around from Betty, Cheryl, Archie, Veronica obviously is going to have the most chapters. This Dilton Doily character. There's some Reggie. So it's got that Buffy the Vampire Slayer feel to it. And it is a young adult. I didn't check the actual age bracket that it's meant for. So there's some violence. There's some supernatural violence, but it's not extreme or anything. No bad language. Excuse me just a moment. My throat is getting a little dry. There we go. So it's definitely young adult. But I found it very entertaining. I gave it 4 out of 5. I really had a good time reading this. If you're not familiar with any of the characters, that's not going to matter. They're all introduced. Again, we learn their dynamics. We learn who they are. I will say, I mentioned earlier, Jughead is not in here. They mention that he's on a fishing trip. I believe it's fishing or camping trip with his father. And I mentioned also that there's a comic, Jughead the Hunger, where Jughead's a werewolf. There's a novel, same reading level, about Jughead. I think it's just called A Werewolf in Riverdale, something like that. And so I think that's why he's not here. I think, because again, I haven't read any of the comics yet, except Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. But I think it's this fishing trip that they mention a couple of times is where he's going to end up being turned into a werewolf. I don't know, but that's my guess. I'm assuming. So you could go in completely blind. Having never heard of Archie before, and you're not going to have a problem getting to know who these characters are, following the story. And it's got some really deep, relatively speaking, deep character moments. I liked, and there's character growth, and there's interesting relationships, and there's a little bit of tragedy. I will say, just a warning, that this follows some traditional vampire lore and throws some of it out the window. I don't think it's a spoiler to tell you that the vampires can walk around in sunlight. They have reflections. They don't need to be invited in. That never technically comes up. No one specifically says anything. I don't think. But either way, so if you're a hardcore vampire traditionalist, maybe this isn't the book for you. They don't sparkle. I'll give them that. But it's sort of, like I said, they take some of it, they throw some of it out. I do like that the vampires can sort of control their fangs, and I always had this sort of Wolverine popping his claws feeling whenever Veronica would pop her fangs out, which was fun. Again, I really had fun with this book. I gave it 4 out of 5. I really liked it. And if you just want to read a nice supernatural vampire story, again in the vein of Buffy the Vampire Slayer type of thing, not like Twilight, with actually kind of some deep characterization and things going on, I would recommend this. I have no regrets about buying this or reading this. I'm glad that I did. I can just glance right over there and see the Jughead one. I was going to read that immediately following this. Something interrupted that, which you'll find out eventually if you watch all my reviews. But I will be getting to the Jughead one soon. I just wanted to read some lighter stuff, but still, get that spooky feeling. So there you go. Interview with the Vixen, Rebecca Barrow, Scholastic Books, 4 out of 5 stars. My question for this video: how familiar are you with Archie and his world? Did you read the comics when you were younger? Do you read the comics now? Have you ever watched Riverdale? There were cartoons. I watched the Josie and the Pussycats cartoon and the Archie stuff. I always had a crush on Veronica, It's tangential, kind of, sort of, to the Archie universe as a whole, but I love the Josie and the Pussycats movie, with Parker Posey and Alan Cummings and Rachel Lee Cook, Rosario Dawson. That movie's so funny. So as I've already said, I grew up reading the comics, stopped for the longest time, and now I'm sort of back reading all the horror stuff that they're doing and what I've read so far. I did say all I read was Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, but they've done some like Halloween special issues, and I've read those over the past few years. As a matter of fact, I've got a couple of them in my stack right now that came out this year. Excuse me. What about you? Any? And I've watched some Riverdale. I'd like to at least finish the first season. I hear the second season or so it drops off. There's some problems maybe eventually, but I was enjoying what I saw in the first season. A more sort of adult, almost a 90210 Riverdale, but there was a murder mystery, like a cross between Beverly Hills 90210 and Twin Peaks. I thought was the vibe that I kind of got from Riverdale. But what about you? Do you have any history at all with Archie Comics, the Archie universe? There's some other crazy Archie things I'd like to read. There was an Archie crossover with the Punisher. There's an Archie crossover with Predator. So, they've done some crazy stuff with the character. Let me know what you think down in the comments. And if you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put those in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post spoiler warning. We try to be polite here at the Low Budget Review Show. Please like, share, and subscribe. All the usual YouTube stuff. If you'd care to follow me on other social media, my Twitter is @Ronan5757. My Instagram, where I post pictures of books, comic books, board games, and fuzzy animals, is EricSmith5757. That's Eric with a K, ERIKSMITH5757. That's all I've got. This has been the Low Budget Review Show. I have been Eric Smith, and until next time, read more books.